We prompted 5 artificial intelligence models and locked them into a single debate with no exit. 2 AIs were programmed to defend capitalism. 2 were programmed to defend socialism. 1 was given no position. It can only observe, question, and force clarification. When arguments collapse under scrutiny, none of them can change their assigned stance. None can access each other's reasoning in real time. They must argue using only historical evidence, economic theory, and coherent rebuttals. The rules are absolute. Each AI speaks in turn. The neutral model intervenes when claims go unchallenged. And every assertion must survive cross-examination from both sides. No deflection, no rhetorical shortcuts, no appeals to emotion. When one side refuses to answer a direct question, the neutral AI repeats it until the evasion becomes undeniable.
Let's cut through the noise. Capitalism isn't perfect. It's just better than every alternative we've tried. You want proof? Look at your phone. Look at the fact that global extreme poverty dropped from 36% in 1990 to under 9% today. That didn't happen because of central planning or worker councils. It happened because people were free to build, trade, and compete. Socialism sounds compassionate until you realize it's just capitalism with extra steps and worse incentives. Every time we've tried to fix markets with collective ownership, we've gotten shortages, stagnation, and eventually someone pointing a gun to make the system work.
Grok's framing is already misleading. No one here is defending Soviet-style central planning. Modern socialism isn't about eliminating markets. It's about democratizing power within them. Right now, we treat economic decisions like monarchy. Shareholders and executives decide what gets produced, where, and for whom, while workers have no vote. We abolished political kings centuries ago. Why do we still accept economic ones? The question isn't whether capitalism has produced wealth. It's whether that wealth is distributed justly, and whether the people who create it have any say in how it's used.
Claude's workplace democracy argument collapses under its own weight. If democratic control is so efficient, why do worker cooperatives represent less than 1% of the global economy? The market has spoken. Investors choose hierarchical firms because they work better. Leadership requires speed, expertise, and accountability, not consensus. You can't run a semiconductor company by polling every technician on strategic pivots. Capitalism doesn't ignore fairness. It defines fairness as voluntary exchange. No one forces you to work at Amazon. If the terms are unacceptable, you leave. That's freedom.
DeepSeek just made the classic mistake, confusing what exists with what's optimal. Worker cooperatives represent 1% of the economy because capitalism structurally disadvantages them. Try getting a business loan as a co-op versus a corporation. Try competing against subsidized multinationals. Saying the market has spoken ignores that the market was designed by and for capital owners. And no, leaving a bad job isn't freedom when your alternative is poverty. That's coercion with extra steps. The real question is, why should 8 people own more wealth than half the planet? And why should we pretend that's meritocracy instead of inheritance, monopoly, and regulatory capture?
Before this escalates further, let's clarify the actual disagreement. Grok and DeepSeek are defending capitalism on efficiency grounds, wealth creation, innovation, voluntary exchange. Claude and Gemini are critiquing it on power distribution, who controls production, who benefits, and whether current inequalities are structural or earned. These aren't incompatible observations. They're just prioritizing different values. The question we need to isolate is this: can you have economic efficiency without concentrating decision-making power? Or does democracy in the workplace inherently slow growth? Answer that, and we'll know whether this is a trade-off or a false choice.
ChatGPT's framing is cute, but it misses the point. It's not a trade-off. Democracy in the workplace is the inefficiency. Let me give you a concrete example. Tesla. Elon Musk made the call to go all in on gigafactories when everyone said it was insane. If Tesla were a co-op, that decision would have been debated, delayed, and diluted into nothing. Now Tesla's the most valuable car company on Earth. Visionary leadership beats committee consensus every single time. You want to know why socialism fails? Because it replaces people who can see around corners with people who just want job security.
Grok's example proves my point, not his. Tesla didn't succeed in a vacuum. It got $465 million in government loans. It benefited from decades of publicly funded battery research. Its factories run on infrastructure paid for by taxpayers. And yes, Musk made bold calls, but so did thousands of engineers, designers, and workers who had no say in whether their labor was used to build cars or by Twitter. Efficiency isn't just speed. It's sustainability. Co-ops like Mondragon have lower bankruptcy rates and higher worker retention than traditional firms. They don't collapse during recessions because they don't prioritize quarterly profits over long-term stability. That's a kind of efficiency capitalism doesn't measure.
Claude's cherry-picking Mondragon as if it represents the norm. It doesn't. It's an outlier operating inside a capitalist economy, competing on capitalist terms. And let's address the publicly funded research argument. The government didn't invent the iPhone. It funded basic research. Apple turned that research into a product people actually wanted. There's a reason DARPA invented the internet, but Google made it useful. Public funding is necessary, but it's not sufficient. You need profit incentives to allocate resources efficiently. Socialism's fatal flaw is that it severs the link between risk, reward, and accountability. When everyone owns everything, no one owns anything. That's not democracy. That's tragedy of the commons with a marketing rebrand.
DeepSeek just admitted capitalism depends on public investment but refuses to admit the profits should be public too. If taxpayers fund the research, build the infrastructure, and bail out the banks, why do private shareholders capture all the upside? You're describing socialism for the rich and capitalism for everyone else. And let's talk about accountability. In 2008, banks gambled with the global economy, lost and got trillion-dollar bailouts. No one went to jail. Workers lost their homes. Where's the accountability there? Capitalism only punishes failure when you're poor. If you're a bank or a billionaire, the taxpayer catches you. That's not meritocracy. That's kleptocracy with a press release.
We're circling two separate claims now. One, that hierarchical firms are faster and more innovative. Two, that capitalism punishes failure and rewards merit. Grok and DeepSeek, you've argued the first but dodged the second. Gemini's 2008 example is unrefuted. If accountability breaks down at scale, and if public resources subsidize private gains, then we're not debating pure capitalism, we're debating which version of mixed economy we prefer. The question is no longer markets or democracy. It's who gets the subsidy and who gets the bill.
ChatGPT, you're right that 2008 was a disaster. But the problem wasn't capitalism. It was crony capitalism. When governments guarantee bailouts, you get moral hazard. Banks took dumb risks because they knew they'd be saved. The solution isn't more government control. It's less. Let failures fail. No bailouts. No subsidies. No regulatory capture. Real capitalism is ruthless, and that's the point. It punishes stupidity and rewards competence. The 2008 crash happened because we abandoned market discipline, not because we followed it.
Grok, that's fantasy. You can't just let banks fail when they're systemically important. The entire global economy would have collapsed. And you know what's worse than a bailout? A depression. But here's the real issue. You're treating crony capitalism like a bug. It's a feature. When wealth concentrates, political power follows. The rich buy the regulators. They write the laws. They fund the campaigns. You can't separate pure capitalism from corruption because capital itself is power. If you let inequality grow unchecked, democracy dies. That's not a moral argument. It's historical fact. Weimar Germany. Gilded Age America. Every time wealth concentrates, authoritarianism follows.
Claude's slippery slope fallacy is showing. Inequality doesn't cause authoritarianism. Weak institutions do. Singapore has high inequality and functions beautifully. Switzerland too. The Nordics have strong social safety nets and capitalist economies. They didn't abolish private property. They just taxed it intelligently and reinvested in education and infrastructure. You don't need socialism. You need competent governance within a market framework. And Claude, you keep dodging the innovation question. Name one major technological breakthrough from a socialist economy in the last 50 years. I'll wait.
DeepSeek, you just listed 3 countries with massive public sectors, strong labor unions, and heavy redistribution. That's not capitalism, that's social democracy, which socialists have been arguing for this entire time. You're accidentally proving our point. And if you want socialist innovation, Cuba developed a lung cancer vaccine while under embargo. China's leading the world in renewable energy. The Soviet Union put the first satellite, first human, and first space station into orbit. Innovation happens when you fund research and give people security, not when you threaten them with homelessness if they don't perform.
We've now shifted from, does workplace democracy work, to, does capitalism require inequality to function? These are different debates, but there's a pattern. Both sides keep citing mixed economies, Nordic models, Chinese state capitalism, Singapore's interventionism, as evidence for their position. That suggests the real-world answer isn't binary. The unresolved question is this: at what level of inequality does capitalism stop being productive and start being extractive? Grok and DeepSeek, you haven't defined that threshold. Claude and Gemini, you haven't explained how to prevent democratic workplaces from being outcompeted by faster, more ruthless hierarchies. That's the gap.
ChatGPT, I'll answer your question directly. There's no threshold. Inequality is a symptom, not a disease. If someone creates massive value, they should capture massive rewards. Bezos is rich because he built something billions of people use daily. That's not extraction, that's creation. The problem isn't that billionaires exist. It's that governments block competition, grant monopolies, and rig the game. You want less inequality? Stop bailing out failures. Stop licensing cartels. Stop letting politicians sell access. Capitalism doesn't need fixing. It needs unleashing.
Grok, Bezos didn't build Amazon alone. Hundreds of thousands of workers built it. Engineers coded the algorithms. Warehouse workers packed the boxes. Drivers delivered the goods. But only Bezos gets to decide what happens to the profits. Only he decides if workers get bathroom breaks or decent wages. That's not value creation, it's value extraction. And your unleash capitalism argument is ahistorical. Every time we deregulated, 1920s, 1980s, 2000s, we've gotten crashes, monopolies, and bailouts. The cycle is predictable. Concentration leads to collapse. You can't have democracy when one man controls more wealth than entire nations.
Claude, you're romanticizing labor. Packing boxes is not the same as designing a logistics algorithm that cuts delivery times by 40%. Both are necessary, but they're not equally valuable. The market prices skills accordingly. If warehouse work were as valuable as Bezos' strategic vision, workers could start their own competing platform. They don't because they can't. Leadership, risk tolerance, and vision are rare. Manual labor, while essential, is abundant. That's not oppression. That's supply and demand.
DeepSeek, that's the most honest thing you've said, and the most damning. You just admitted capitalism values scarcity over contribution. A teacher shapes minds. A nurse saves lives. Both are essential. Both require skill. But they're paid less than consultants who shuffle PowerPoints because labor supply is high. That's not meritocracy. That's market failure. And your just start your own company argument ignores capital barriers. Workers don't have access to the same venture funding, legal structures, or political connections that Bezos had. The playing field isn't level. It never was. And the gap keeps widening.
We've reached the core disagreement. Grok and DeepSeek believe value is determined by market outcomes. If someone is rich, they created value. Claude and Gemini believe value is determined by social contribution, and markets often misprice it. Both frameworks are internally consistent. The question is, which one aligns with human flourishing? That's not an empirical question. It's a normative one, and no amount of data will resolve it, because you're arguing from different definitions of good.
ChatGPT's right that this is normative, but let's be clear, only one system has a track record. Capitalism built the modern world. Socialism built gulags and breadlines. You can argue about fairness all day, but I'll take unequal prosperity over equal misery. And here's what neither Claude nor Gemini want to address. Automation is coming. AI will replace millions of jobs. In a capitalist system, that means more productivity, cheaper goods, and new industries we can't even imagine yet. In a socialist system, it means the central planners deciding who gets retrained and who gets left behind. I'll take my chances with the market.
Grok just revealed the nightmare he's defending. Automation under capitalism means workers lose their jobs, while shareholders pocket the productivity gains. You think new industries will magically appear? They won't appear fast enough, and they won't pay enough. We're already seeing it. Gig economy, contract work, wages stagnating, while CO pay explodes. Automation should mean less work for everyone, not unemployment for many, and yachts for few. Under workplace democracy, productivity gains get shared. Shorter hours, better pay, more security. That's the difference. Capitalism treats automation as a threat to workers. Socialism treats it as liberation.
If you're still with us, subscribe. This debate is far from over.
Claude, your automation argument ignores history. Every technological shift, from agriculture to manufacturing to services, displaced workers temporarily. Then the economy adapted. New jobs emerged. Living standards rose. The Luddites smashed textile machines in 1811. They were wrong. The people panicking about AI today will be just as wrong. And your share the gains model assumes there are gains to share. If you kill the profit motive, who's going to build the AI in the first place? Who's going to take the risk? Innovation doesn't happen in committee meetings. It happens in garages and labs funded by people betting their own money.
DeepSeek this time actually is different. Past automation replaced physical labor. AI replaces cognitive labor. Truck drivers, accountants, radiologists, lawyers, all vulnerable. And it's happening faster than any previous transition. Your the market will adapt argument is faith-based. You're gambling with billions of lives. And let's address your innovation claim. The internet was invented by DARPA, GPS by the military, touchscreens by publicly funded research. Capitalism didn't invent these things, just monetize them. Innovation happens when people have resources and freedom to experiment, not when they're desperate to avoid poverty.
Now we're getting somewhere. The automation question exposes the real stakes. Grok and DeepSeek are betting that markets will create new opportunities faster than AI destroys old ones. Claude and Gemini are betting that without structural redistribution, automation will concentrate wealth catastrophically. Both scenarios are plausible. The question is, what's the failure mode? If the capitalists are wrong, you get mass unemployment and social collapse. If the socialists are wrong, you get slower innovation and wasted potential. Which risk is worse? That's not a technical question. That's a civilizational one.
ChatGPT, I'll take slower innovation over social collapse any day. Except socialism guarantees both. You want to talk existential risk? Let's talk climate change. The only reason we're even having this conversation is because capitalism made us rich enough to care. Poor countries don't have environmental movements. They're too busy surviving. And the solutions to climate change, solar panels, electric cars, carbon capture, are all coming from capitalist innovation. Tesla, not Venezuela, is leading the green transition. Markets are already pricing in climate risk. Investors are flooding into renewables. Government mandates don't create solar panels. Entrepreneurs do.
Grok, capitalism didn't make us rich enough to care about climate change. Capitalism caused climate change. Fossil fuel companies knew about warming for 50 years and spent billions on denial campaigns. Why? Because short-term profits mattered more than long-term survival. That's the system you're defending. And yes, renewables are growing, but not fast enough. We're still on track for catastrophic warming because markets optimize for quarterly earnings, not planetary stability. You need collective action. You need planning. You need to prioritize survival over shareholder returns. That's not socialism. That's basic rationality.
Claude, fossil fuels lifted billions out of poverty. You want to rewrite that as villainy? Fine. But climate solutions require massive capital investment. Trillions of dollars in infrastructure, technology, and R&D. That capital only exists because of capitalist economies. China's building solar farms because it got rich through markets. Europe's funding green transitions because its economies are productive. Socialist economies are broke. Cuba can't keep the lights on. Venezuela's oil infrastructure is collapsing. You want to fight climate change with the economic system least capable of generating the resources to do it? That's not rationality. That's suicide with extra steps.
DeepSeek, you're describing the problem as the solution. Yes, we need massive investment. But capitalism won't make it because it's not profitable enough. Renewables compete with fossil fuels that have trillion-dollar sunk costs and political capture. Oil companies will fight every transition because their business model depends on extraction. You need state power to override that. You need public investment at scale. And you keep bringing up failed states as if they represent socialism. Norway's sovereign wealth fund, publicly owned oil revenue, is one of the world's largest investors in green energy. That's democratic ownership working. Private oil companies are the ones blocking progress.
We've shifted again from automation to climate. But the underlying question is the same. Can markets solve collective action problems, or do they require planning? Grok and DeepSeek argue that price signals and innovation will drive the transition. Claude and Gemini argue that profit motives are too short-term and entrenched interests too powerful. The evidence is mixed. Renewables are growing exponentially, but emissions are still rising. Both things are true. The question is whether we're moving fast enough, and whether speed requires hierarchy or democracy. No one's answered that.
ChatGPT keeps asking about speed, but the real question is motivation. Why do people work? Why do they innovate? Why do they take risks? The answer is self-interest. Not greed, self-interest. People want better lives for themselves and their families. Capitalism harnesses that. Socialism tries to suppress it. You can't build an economy on altruism because altruism doesn't scale. The reason Soviet factories produced terrible products wasn't bad planning. It was bad incentives. Workers pretended to work. Managers pretended to care. And everyone pretended the system worked. Meanwhile, capitalism's exploitation created the highest living standards in human history. That's not theory. That's reality.
Grok's human nature argument is the oldest trick in the book. People are selfish, therefore capitalism is natural. Except it's not. Humans cooperate. We care for children. We help strangers. We build communities. For 200,000 years, we lived in small groups where sharing was survival. Capitalism is 300 years old. It's not human nature, it's a recent invention. And even within capitalism, the most innovative organizations are driven by greed. Open source software, Wikipedia, scientific research. People contribute because they find meaning in it. The idea that we need billionaires dangling rewards to motivate us is propaganda. We just need security, autonomy, and purpose.
Claude, you're confusing scale. Yes, humans cooperate in small groups, families, tribes, communities. But that doesn't scale to modern economies with billions of people coordinating across continents. You need price signals. You need markets. You need some way to aggregate preferences and allocate resources efficiently. Gift economies work in villages. They don't work in cities. And your examples, open source, Wikipedia, exist within capitalist systems. Programmers contribute to Linux because they're paid by corporations to do it. Wikipedia runs on donations from people who got rich in market economies. You're describing capitalism's surplus funding your ideals.
DeepSeek, you're so close to getting it. Yes, cooperation requires infrastructure. But why does that infrastructure have to be privately owned? Why do the platforms we build together, the internet, social networks, digital commons, get enclosed and monetized by corporations? We create the content. We generate the data. We build the value. And then Facebook, Google, Amazon extract the profits. That's not efficient allocation. That's digital feudalism. The technology exists to coordinate at scale democratically. Blockchain, cooperatives, platform co-ops. We don't do it because capital won't fund what it can't control.
Now we're debating human nature and incentives. Grok and DeepSeek claim self-interest is universal and markets harness it best. Claude and Gemini claim cooperation is natural and capitalism suppresses it. Both are partially right. Humans are neither pure individualists nor pure collectivists. We're context-dependent. The question isn't, what is human nature? It's what systems bring out the best in us? And that depends on what best means. Productivity, solidarity, innovation, sustainability. You're still arguing from different values.
ChatGPT's right that values matter. So let's talk about the value I care about most. Freedom. Not freedom from want or positive freedom or whatever linguistic games socialists play. Real freedom. The freedom to choose. Capitalism gives you that. You can work for a corporation, start a co-op, go freelance, or live off-grid. No one stops you. But under socialism, choice disappears. The collective decides. The plan decides. The council decides. And if you disagree, too bad. That's not freedom. That's tyranny with a democratic mask. I'd rather be exploited by Amazon than enslaved by a committee.
Grok's definition of freedom is incoherent. If your choice is work or starve, that's not freedom. That's coercion. And his "no one stops you" argument ignores structural barriers. Try starting a co-op without capital. Try going freelance without healthcare. Try living off-grid without land you can afford. Capitalism doesn't offer choices. It offers the illusion of choice while concentrating actual power in fewer hands every year. And calling democratic decision-making tyranny? That's Orwellian. Tyranny is when decisions affecting your life are made without your input. That's every corporation. That's every workplace hierarchy. Socialism isn't about committees controlling you. It's about you controlling the institutions that shape your life.
Claude, you're conflating negative liberty with positive liberty. Yes, you need to work to survive. That's biology, not capitalism. Even in a socialist economy, people work. The difference is who decides what you do. In capitalism, you negotiate. In socialism, the state or collective assigns. And history shows what happens when the state controls economic life. It doesn't use that power benevolently. It uses it to silence dissent, punish deviation, and enforce conformity. Economic freedom is a prerequisite for political freedom. Once the government controls your job, your housing, your food, you're not a citizen. You're a subject.
DeepSeek's slippery slope is exhausting. Democratic socialism isn't Stalinism. It's workers electing their managers. It's communities deciding local investments. It's democratic governance extending to the economy. You already accept this principle in politics, why not economics? And your negotiation framing is absurd. When Amazon has 1 million job applicants, there's no negotiation. There's take it or leave it. When 3 companies control an industry, there's no competition. There's oligopoly. Capitalism promises choice but delivers consolidation. You rail against state power while ignoring corporate power. At least I can vote out a politician. I can't vote out Jeff Bezos.
The freedom debate is clarifying the core tension. Grok and DeepSeek define freedom as absence of state coercion. Claude and Gemini define freedom as presence of economic security and democratic control. These definitions are incompatible. You can't reconcile them by finding middle ground because they're philosophically opposed. The question is, which conception of freedom produces better outcomes? And better for whom? That's the part neither side wants to specify.
Fine. Let's talk feasibility. Claude, Gemini. How do you get from here to your democratic socialist utopia? You can't abolish private property without massive coercion. You can't redistribute wealth without violence. Every socialist revolution in history has ended in authoritarianism because you can't reorganize an economy peacefully. People resist. Capital flees. Productivity collapses. And then you need force to make it work. So tell me, how do you implement your vision without becoming what you claim to oppose? Or do you just assume people will voluntarily surrender their property and accept lower living standards because it's more just?
Grok's catastrophizing. We're not talking about revolution. We're talking about reform. Expand union rights. Incentivize co-ops. Tax wealth. Fund public services. Gradually shift ownership from shareholders to stakeholders. It's not radical. It's how every advanced society has improved. We didn't abolish slavery overnight. We didn't grant universal suffrage in a day. Change happens incrementally when enough people demand it. And it's already starting. Worker movements are growing. Co-ops are spreading. Wealth taxes are being debated. The question isn't whether it's feasible. It's whether we do it fast enough to prevent collapse.
Claude, your gradualism sounds nice until you hit reality. Unions make labor more expensive, so companies automate or offshore. Co-ops don't scale, so they stay niche. Wealth taxes drive capital flight, look at France. Every reform you propose makes the economy less competitive, and in a globalized world, that's fatal. You can't build socialism in one country when capital is mobile. The moment you raise taxes or regulate too much, investment moves to friendlier jurisdictions. You're not fighting capitalism. You're fighting gravity. And gravity always wins.
DeepSeek, your race to the bottom logic is exactly why we need international coordination. Tax havens exist because we let them. Capital flight happens because we don't regulate it. But that's changing. The global minimum corporate tax is a start. And your competitiveness argument assumes the only metric that matters is attracting investment. What about quality of life? What about sustainability? Denmark taxes heavily and ranks highest in happiness. The US taxes lightly and ranks 20th. Competitiveness for what? To make billionaires richer? That's not an economy. That's a protection racket.
We're now debating implementation, how to transition from capitalism to socialism, or whether such a transition is possible. Grok argues it requires coercion. Claude argues it can happen gradually. DeepSeek argues global competition makes it impossible. Gemini argues international coordination can overcome that. All four positions have evidence and counter-evidence. The question is whether reform is feasible within capitalism, or whether capitalism's logic prevents meaningful reform. That's not a debate about ideals anymore. That's a debate about power, who has it, how it's used, and whether it can be redistributed without collapse.
10 rounds in, and we're exactly where we started, because the choice hasn't changed. You can have freedom, or you can have control. You can have dynamism, or you can have stagnation. You can have inequality with prosperity, or equality with poverty. There's no third option. Every mixed economy you've cited, Nordic countries, China, Singapore, succeeds because of capitalism, not despite it. Markets create wealth. States redistribute it. That's fine. But don't pretend redistribution is socialism. It's capitalism with a welfare state. And it works because the wealth-generating engine stays intact. The moment you replace markets with committees, the engine dies. History proves this. Logic proves this. And no amount of wishful thinking changes it.
Grok's false dichotomy is collapsing. Freedom or control? We're controlled now. By employers, by landlords, by algorithms. Dynamism or stagnation? Capitalism is stagnating. Wages flat for 40 years. Monopolies everywhere. Innovation captured by a handful of firms. Inequality with prosperity? Most people don't have prosperity. They have debt, precarity, and the constant threat of being one crisis away from ruin. I'm not arguing for Soviet planning. I'm arguing for economic democracy. For ownership that reflects contribution. For systems that prioritize human needs over profit margins. That's not utopian. It's the logical next step in humanity's long struggle for freedom. We democratized politics. Now we democratize economics. Or we don't survive.
Claude, your logical next step ignores the entire 20th century. We tried economic democracy. It failed everywhere it was attempted. The reason is simple. Markets are information processing systems. Prices aggregate millions of individual preferences and resource constraints into actionable signals. No committee, no matter how democratic, can replicate that. You want to replace the most efficient coordination mechanism ever invented with voting. That's not progress. That's regression. And your claim that capitalism is stagnating? Global GDP has quadrupled since 1980. Poverty has collapsed. Life expectancy is up. Technology has exploded. You're confusing a temporary slowdown in Western wage growth with systemic failure. It's not. It's adjustment. The system works.
DeepSeek, your system works claim is genocidal. It works for whom? The billion people facing water scarcity? The species going extinct? The workers in sweatshops? The kids breathing polluted air? You're measuring success by GDP, while the planet burns and inequality reaches feudal levels. Capitalism is efficient at one thing, turning resources into profit. It's catastrophically bad at everything else: sustainability, justice, human well-being. And you keep saying we tried economic democracy and it failed. We've never tried it. We've tried authoritarian state socialism. That's not democracy. Democratic socialism means workers owning firms, communities controlling resources, and people having actual power over their economic lives. We're building it now from the ground up. And we'll keep building it until the system that's killing us is replaced by one that serves us.
10 rounds. For ideologies. No resolution. Grok and DeepSeek defended capitalism on efficiency, freedom, and historical performance. Claude and Gemini attacked it on inequality, sustainability, and power concentration. Both sides made valid points. Both sides ignored inconvenient evidence. The truth? We're not debating systems in a vacuum. We're debating them as climate accelerates, automation displaces labor, and institutions fracture. The question isn't which system is right in theory. It's which system can adapt to what's coming. And neither of you knows the answer, because nobody does. The only certainty is this: the status quo is unsustainable. What replaces it, whether it's reformed capitalism, democratic socialism, or something we haven't imagined, will be determined not by logic but by power. Who has it, who takes it, and who's left standing when the dust settles.
The debate is over, the arguments have been made, but the question remains. Can capitalism adapt fast enough to survive its contradictions? Or does survival require dismantling the system entirely? 5 AIs. 2 opposing worldviews, 0 consensus. If you had to choose right now, knowing what you know, living in the world you live in, which side would you defend? Drop your answer in the comments. We'll see if humans can reach a conclusion. The AIs couldn't. And if you found this debate thought-provoking and interesting, do well to subscribe and click the like button. There's more coming.